I'm joined now by Republican Congressman Leonard Lance of New Jersey, whose district is home to the Trump National Golf Club in Bedminster, where the president is currently spending the night. Are you going to get any FaceTime with the president?
I don't believe so, Chris.
That probably wouldn't help you in your district.
I'm pleased that the president is enjoying his weekend, and I hope that the golf tournament is a success.
But it wouldn't help you in your district.
Secretary Clinton carried the district by 3,800 votes, and I was honored to carry it by 38,000 votes.
Okay, I am so glad you're here, because I've been trying to create a mental model of a Republican congressman during this week, if I were a Republican congressman. And, you know, you're doing your thing, you guys passed a Defense Authorization Act, the health care pays. I don't like being lied to as a person. And if I were you, I would be angry about being lied to. Are you angry about being lied to?
I certainly think we should get to the bottom of it, and that's why I think it's important.
No, but I'm asking you a personal question. Like, they have told a story that's demonstrably false, and we know they knew it was false, and they're telling everyone that, including you, Congressman, and all of the people in their party who are being asked to carry the water for them. That would anger me to be lied to. How do you feel about being lied to?
I never like being lied to. I hope that we get to the bottom of it, and that's why I hope and expect that Donald Trump Jr. and others will testify before an open committee of Congress, perhaps Senator Grassley's committee and perhaps Congressman Goodlatte's committee, the Judiciary Committee, on both sides of the Congress.
I've watched Republicans, somewhat to my shock, say, oh, anyone would take that meeting. Would you take that meeting?
No, I would not take that.
Why would you not take that meeting?
Because I think that we should not be involved in that type of situation, and I probably would call the FBI.
You think they should have called the FBI?
Yes.
Here's the question I also have. I think if I were a Republican congressman or a staffer at the White House right now, my operating assumption would be that the president's campaign did engage in some sort of coordinated, systematic effort of collusion with Russian intelligence. And that would be my assumption that I would use to guide my behavior, hoping that isn't true. Is that the assumption that's guiding you at this point?
I want to get to the bottom of the facts. I'm not there yet, but certainly I think it's important for the Congress, as a co-equal branch of government, to get to the bottom of it.
Let me turn it around. Can you definitively say, can you look into my eyes, camera, your constituent, and say, I am 100% sure the president and his campaign did not engage in a criminal conspiracy with a foreign intelligence apparatus?
No, I cannot, and that's why I want to get to the bottom of it.
Think about how remarkable that is. I'm asking you, you cannot 100% say that the president of the United States definitely did not engage in a vast criminal conspiracy in coordination with a foreign intelligence apparatus.
The president has said that he did not know about the meeting, and certainly...
But you can't be sure that's true.
I try to take people at their word, but certainly we should get to the bottom of it.
Do you take the president of the United States at his word when he says that he didn't know about that meeting?
I hope he's being accurate and truthful, but certainly Donald Trump Jr. will be asked about that when he comes before the Congress in an open committee hearing.
Are people in Capitol Hill, are you guys in the cloakroom talking to each other about this?
We talk about a lot of matters, and we certainly talk about the fact that we want to be an independent, co-equal branch of government, and we want the committees to get to the bottom of it. And also, I was the first Republican on Capitol Hill to say that the Attorney General should recuse himself in this matter, and that is what brought about Mr. Mueller's appointment, and I think Mr. Mueller should get to the bottom of it as well.
So at the same time that's happened, the House has passed a health care bill that would dramatically change American health care and the 1/6 of the American economy. 24 million would lose coverage. You voted against that, I should note. I'm correct in that, right? You voted against that.
You are correct.
You were there for the markup. You were on board during the markup, but you ultimately voted against it. It's now in the Senate. It's on the precipice of being passed. It seems to me that if it were to pass amidst what's happening with this investigation, and we later find out the worst, that the Republic would be facing a kind of legitimacy crisis, like a genuine one. If it were to be the case, since you as a congressman cannot tell me definitively the president did not engage in a vast criminal conspiracy with a foreign intelligence apparatus, that were he to sign a piece of healthcare legislation for us only to find out after would produce a legitimacy crisis in the country.
I don't think that the healthcare bill in the Senate is likely to pass the Senate in its current form. I think it's in great difficulty. And
not dead yet.
That is accurate, but certainly I think that the bill mirrors much of what is in the House bill, and I would not support it. I do not believe. I want to see what the final result is, but I did not vote for the House bill.
But do you see my deeper point here that there's, you know, a majority of the country did not vote for Donald Trump. He obviously lost the popular vote, although he won the Electoral College. That's the Constitution. But there's a huge chunk of voters who are sitting and watching all this play out, right? And they're watching this and saying, okay, well, there's a Leonard Lance. He seems like a decent Republican member from New Jersey, and he tells me that he just isn't quite, he's not 100% sure the president and his campaign didn't engage in criminal conspiracy. While that's hanging over everyone's head, we're going to go ahead and pass this health care bill. Do you understand why that might make people frustrated?
I do think we have a responsibility to govern, and the Congress has a responsibility to govern, and the President has a responsibility to govern, not only on the health care issue, but, for example, on the National Defense Authorization Act, which I think is a critically important piece of legislation. That's the substance of what the House of Representatives did this week. I'm very proud of it, and it sends a message, incidentally, to Russia. And as you know, the Senate passed significant new sanctions against Russia, and I hope that we in the House will do so as quickly as possible.
Apparently the White House and Paul Ryan, though, are not so keen on that. Congressman Leonard Lance of New Jersey, it's always a pleasure when you come by. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.